The planet is ours. Now we may do with it as we please. In this last lecture, I'm going to talk about Homo sapiens and perhaps the future of evolution. I'd like you to be able to relate the evolution of Homo sapiens to niche partitioning and competition. Explain some theories on what happened to the Neanderthals. List similarities and differences between foraging tribes and post-industrial tribes. And make some, have some fun. Make some wild hypotheses about the future of our species. I'm going to start this with fish. So I want to start this discussing extinctions of the past. So in the past, there have been mass extinctions, and one of which came about when jawed fish arose. So there was an adaptive radiation of gnathosomes. Imagine, if you will, a species before jawed fish existed. The defenses against something that would be so fast and such a great predator just didn't exist. Fish beforehand would basically be able to use their use mouth parts to kind of rub away at things that could be parasitic, and they could be grazers, really. With the evolution of jaws, they can basically swoop in. These are very fast-moving predators for the time, and take bites out of things and crush shells. And honestly, there was an extinction of many phyla without having enough armor. And this also leads us to some sort of a fossil bias. We don't know how many extinctions of jellyfish there were when jawed fish arose, because jellyfish don't fossilize well. How many extinctions of sponges occurred when fish began to chomp chunks out of them? We don't have the knowledge, because there simply are not fossils. And this is what we get with a bit of a fossil bias. Things with armor and things with bones are easier to fossilize than the things without. So there's a certain amount of unknown about our past. One thing we do know is what happened during the Permian. Things went extinct. However, why is kind of a question. Some would be saying that it was a climate issue. So what could have happened is that there was a bit of global warming, and there was a die-off of organisms in the oceans. That die-off of organisms in the oceans caused a massive release of hydrogen sulfide, which would have then poisoned the air around the planet. This global warming could have been because of bubbling up of methane from the ocean floor, which would have resulted in a relatively quick spike of global warming, much like we are seeing today. A relatively quick spike of global warming, shutting down of the Earth's oceanic conveyor belts, lack of mixing in the oxygens, oceanic die-off, hydrogen sulfide gas from rotting things, Earth gets toxic air, 90% of things die. Could also have been volcanic events causing massive amounts of acid rain. Could have been a meteor that hit the Earth. Could have been volcanic activity causing the Deccan Traps to flood over. Could have been a series of extinctions and tragedies over 7 million years. Could have been a series of extinctions and tragedies over 100,000 years. Some say with a meteor impact, could have been a series of extinctions and tragedies over 10 years. We don't truly know. What we do know is everything died. Not everything. 90% of life on Earth went extinct in a relatively short time, geologically speaking. So, the Earth has seen massive extinctions before, and that's where I'd like to bring us when we begin Homo sapiens. It's a relatively innocuous, hairless ape. The brain is large. The face actually looks kind of like a child compared to the other apes at the time. So having this more childish look, expanded brain, almost baby-like look, it's just not as robust as Homo neanderthalensis. It can't chew roots like Paranthropus used to. It's not all around the globe like Homo erectus is. This species, or maybe subspecies of humans, is relatively unimpressive. However, very quickly after it arose, everything else went extinct. Well, what's special about this species? Well, we find it in about 160,000 years ago. This is just barely any time, speaking geologically. And we see that it actually has a good amount of art and culture. The frontal lobe is more developed, and that may have caused better planning. You see all around caves, these very specific hand surrounded by paint. What would happen was the individual would just fill their mouth with paint and put their hand up and over their hand. It is really the I was here of the moment. It is, realistically, it's a selfie. It's showing that you are here, you are present. It's the identity, the id, the very idea of the self, the ego, actually, I should say. Not the id, that's the older brain. This is the ego, and perhaps even the superego as they begin to have conceptual thought, advanced language and social groups, culture, inhibitions. We see objects that were made for probably nothing but worship, which is kind of really abstract thought going on in that frontal lobe. And this species is something special, but very specifically something mentally special, very different from other organisms due to the decadence of its brain. An expensive brain, though. And it wandered around searching for, more food for its brain. Okay, that was not probably the only thing that drove it. There were probably a lot of things that drove human migrations. Let's be honest. Curiosity probably drove some human migrations. Let's be practical. Following the food sources drove some migrations. Let's be silly. They were chasing their dreams. They left Africa about 40,000 years to maybe 100,000 years after they evolved. That's a relatively short amount of time. By 15,000 years ago, they were even colonizing Cuba. They had colonized all of North America, and at some point they arrived in Tierra del Fuego. The last place to be colonized was actually, despite what this may say, New Zealand, I believe. It was either New Zealand or Hawaii. But these are the last places to be colonized after this species actually invented boats to float over on the ocean. They could build their own, float farther away. So they spread rapidly, and they spread everywhere. And this is what's supported by the morphological and genetic data of what we see with human migrations. Now, there are alternate hypotheses, one of which would have a tribe of 10 tribes of Israelites coming in and colonizing the entirety of North and South America, but that is simply not supported by anything. So there are different theories for this, but this is the main one. Where they went, death followed. First off, the other primates. Where Homo sapiens arose, and wherever they went, other Homo species went extinct shortly afterwards. So Homo erectus either bred in with Homo sapiens and became part of them, or it just went extinct. Homo neanderthalensis and Homo sapiens both coexisted for a little while, and then they didn't. So it may have been this breeding in of Neanderthals with the Homo sapiens. It may have been that the change in climate actually favored Homo sapiens over Homo neanderthalensis, the different ability to throw spears rather than thrust spears in the changing world that is turning from forest to plains. Could have been a certain amount with competition between these species favoring Homo sapiens as the climate changed. However, it's also entirely possible that Homo sapiens simply hunted Neanderthals down. We have actually seen in our time certain groups of humans deciding to actually hunt down other groups of humans and kill them, just for the sake of getting rid of them. So we know that other primates have a tendency to go extinct where Homo sapiens exists. This is true also of Homo erectus, Homo floresiensis, and it could have just been something as simple as climate change, or they could have evolved and coexisted with us or been outcompeted. We also can see that most current primates are going to extinction. As we plow down the forests of Southeast Asia to form palm oil plantations, the orangutans are going out. As our wars drive some humans to be refugees in the jungle to hunt bushmeat, the chimpanzees and bonobos and gorillas are going extinct. As we deforest, you get the idea. Basically, we're killing off all the other primates. We're eating them. We're destroying their habitats. It's competition all over again. We are not a good neighbor. We are destroying the remainder of not only our genus, but our family. We are cutting down the family tree. Where Homo sapiens went, many species died. And this is one thing about megafauna. Back before the Lewis and Clark expedition, it was a well-known fact that there simply were not any big mammals in North America. There were no elephants, there were no camels, there were no giant wolves. The bears were relatively small. There were no giant sloths. There were no big animals. And actually, one of the things in the Lewis and Clark expedition was to look for bigger fossils to show that yes, there were actually big creatures here. There's some belief in this. Well, we found fossils of elephants and found bones in the caves, and they had spear points stuck in them. We found that dire wolves went extinct. They used to exist in North America. There's a lion in North America. The short-faced bear was a massive ursid that lived in North America. Camels may have actually evolved in North America alongside horses. Both of these went extinct around the same time. Glyptodonts went extinct in South America. These armored tanks with spiky tails. We also know that there were giant rheas that would live in New Zealand. Moas lived in New Zealand. All of these animals, the absolute apex of evolution for defense. And I'm not even mentioning this giant sloth here. So these giant sloths were massive creatures, very well defended with huge claws. The Megatherium sloth, if it slapped you, you'd hear a ringing in your ears. Mind you, your skull and their head would be several meters away from your body when that ringing is occurring, because it could just decapitate you with a lazy sloth slap. These were enormous creatures, and they were taken by surprise. They were fighting off something that just had a pointy rock on the end of a stick, and the ability to think really, really carefully about what it was doing. These animals in North America, South America, and some parts of Asia were taken by surprise when Homo sapiens arose. What's interesting is the species that co-evolved with Homo sapiens, those African and Indian fauna, they actually survived because they learned to be wary of those weird bipedal apes, probably learning from experiences with Homo erectus. The ones that were not careful enough, well, they went extinct. But around the rest of the globe, where Homo sapiens went, things died. So we've made several advances as a species. I'm going to use the word advances cautiously. Foraging tribes of Homo sapiens still exist, with a diet mainly of meats, nuts, and wild plants. As I said earlier, obesity is rare. Myopia is very rare. Now, there is intertribal competition that leads to some homozygosity of certain alleles, but that might be an artifact of these tribes actually losing a lot of land to other tribes of humans that just adopted different technology. A difference in foraging tribes and the post-agricultural hominid is that these foraging tribes have very strong sense of culture, strong sense of belonging, great knowledge of the local fauna and flora, and real relation with the natural world. Not all of them live sustainably, but some do live on a relatively sustainable manner with the nature around them. So this is what we can see, is that Homo sapiens could have advances into living in relative harmony with nature. We actually see food forests evidence of food forests in the Amazon. I recommend to you read the book 1491. It shows that Native Americans were not just a group of people have said savages. They were not by any means. They were actually complex civilizations of Native Americans before 1491 that existed not entirely in harmony with nature, but with a lot more density than we would have thought. So we've been able to see humankind actually take different paths towards or away from nature. But we do know that this sense of belonging, the sense of nature, and the interconnections of culture and nature were lost with other advances towards an agricultural society, with diets of grains, meats, food products, the idea of taming the land and making it yours. This group of hominids lives longer. They are more genetically diverse, but that could also be an artifact of just how technology has been adopted. But then you have obesity, myopia, anxiety, depression, alcoholism, a lot of genetic disorders that are occurring with these species. Then you just get this group of myopic apes that are all looking at the world through cellular phones. All I would point out but one, who is the only one really seeming to, in my opinion, to enjoy the moment for what it is. Look at the older woman in the center there, and you can think about how we as humans interact with society. Do we interact with it through the lens of our technology, or do we interact with the moment and enjoy it? Do we interact with nature through the lens of our technology, or do we live in the moment and adopt it into our culture? Humankind has different trajectories historically, and these advances, they make more humans, but they might not be good as an end goal. We may be on the verge of the next great extinction. Not since the Cretaceous and Cretaceous Tertiary boundary have so many species really been going out. Humans don't even know how many species they're killing off. We see the ice caps melting. We see large numbers of birds being washed up on the beach, their stomachs full of plastic islands floating in the sea, plastic existing on the ocean bottom, global carbon dioxide change, deforestation, urbanization, agricultural waste seeping out into the ocean, causing massive die-offs. I could go on and on and on about the number of ways that humans, through their myopic abilities and through their own stomachs and feeding their own stomachs, are really destroying the world. And they really are bringing a lot of creatures to extinction. One of which, of course, may be Homo sapiens. So where do we go from here? Is it possible that Homo sapiens will slip the bounds of this blue sphere, explore the cosmos? Could we just find another planet, live there in disharmony? Could we bring ourselves to extinction? When I grew up, we had occasionally to dive under the desks to practice, just in case there were a nuclear weapon attack. You get to go under the desk, that way they can find your body easier, I guess. You avoid the fallout, maybe, I don't know. What happens, though, is we know we could drive ourselves to extinction. If we were given the order somehow to kill off ourselves, we could do it in a matter of hours. We could just start launching nukes all over the globe. Most of our population would die in minutes. Could we perhaps become inhuman, to marry human and machine together, to give up some of our simple hominid parts, to get rid of myopia when we lose our eyes, to get rid of obesity when we, I don't know how we change our intestines, but to basically get rid of our faulty bits and replace them with machine bits? Could we even become minds within machines and save our consciousness in the form of gigabytes? This is a time in class where I'd like people to wildly fantasize about some science fiction. So the bounds of humanity are variable. We could live in harmony with nature. We'd have to kill off a lot of humans first. I don't think we're at that point. We could destroy our own planet. We could leave the planet, or we can become something other than human. Take a moment to think, and take a moment to talk about your favorite science fiction. I'd love to hear it. I'm always looking for some new sci-fi to read. I'd like to take a moment to talk about the Cretaceous, and the end of it specifically. It was a day like any other in the Cretaceous, when a large meteor crashed into the Earth near the Yucatan Peninsula. Now, it hit the land, and when it hit the land, it created, where the land and ocean are pretty much, it created an enormous cloud of dust and debris. The heat from this event, when it actually hit the Earth, burst around the area and reflected off of the debris to basically cook North America like an oven from above being broiled. The area all near the impact site was just annihilated, and nothing could live there. Even the rocks themselves were shocked. Around the globe, this massive cloud of smoke and ash and debris from the impact actually spread around and cloaked the Earth in a shroud of destruction. Pieces of the Earth's molten center, well, not center, but underneath the crust, were ejected into space. Where they landed, actually, we found them. I believe on the moon, and maybe even on Mars. We actually even find these pieces of Earth that were thrown into space by this massive explosion. The Earth was clouded in smoke and ash, and no sunlight could get through for quite some time. The Earth baked. I believe it was 90% of the Earth's forests burned. On the other side of the planet, fire rained from the sky. And that's just the first week. Welcome to the hellscape that was the Cretaceous Tertiary Transition event, the KT extinction. Just imagine, within 1 week, going from a normal day to living under a cloud of ash and raining down fire. Now, afterwards, the oceans, of course, were shocked with 90% of the world's forests gone. We have to consider how much oxygen was available. Then you have to think about how much less oxygen would be available if you don't have marine organisms doing photosynthesis. So you have an oxygen shock event, you have a baking event, you have a sterilization event. There were waves coming from this impact site that swept up massive dams of dead animals into Nebraska. Sorry, into Wyoming. It's a little farther north, the Hell's Canyon, I think. But this global extinction event was very, very rapid. It was an incredibly destructive event. It left this iridium anomaly because the iridium from the meteorite went around the Earth and was deposited around the Earth at this massive extinction. It was bad. It was real bad. Compared to global warming, compared to plastics, this was worse. The KT extinction was within a week, and the extinctions afterwards that continued as the fallout kept. Life carried on. We're here because of that mass extinction event. Life will continue pretty much no matter what we do. Some bacteria can still crawl up onto the, can crawl around and reproduce and do its thing. I really want to put your mind at ease. Humans are doing horrible things, and you have the choice of not doing those things. But do keep in mind that life will continue despite you. You're not the end all. Evolution is greater than the monsters it spawns. Earth will abide after humans. We are not the end of the evolutionary story. We are merely some bizarre fish that got on land, put a pointy rock on a stick, and changed the world. Thank you for enjoying this class.